So these two factors combined, I would say, would make eating disorders maybe the ideal case study for the application of the principles of evolutionary medicine.
I'm Adam Hunt, and this is the Evolving Psychiatry podcast, rethinking mental health through an evolutionary lens. Share it with the people who matter, like it if you like it, subscribe if you want to hear more. Okay, so Dr. Riadh Abed qualified in 1974 in Baghdad and trained in the UK from 1979 onwards. He worked as a consultant psychiatrist for the NHS and an honorary senior lecturer at the University of Sheffield for 25 years, retiring in 2012, with the last 7 years as medical director of a mental health trust in South Yorkshire. Riadh is currently a medical member of the mental health tribunals in England. He's had an interest in the application of evolutionary theory to the understanding of mental disorders since the mid-90s, and he's published novel evolutionary theories on eating disorders, OCD, and schizophrenia, as well as research findings, review articles, chapters on evolutionary psychiatry subjects, and he is one of the chief editors of the upcoming book. Riadh has had a really leading light role in the United Kingdom in evolutionary psychiatry. He was instrumental in the formation of the Evolutionary Psychiatry Special Interest Group within the Royal College of Psychiatrists. That was in 2016, in collaboration with Paul St. John Smith, who's another one of our interviewees in another episode. He was the founding chair, actually, from 2016 to 2020, and is currently the finance officer. Okay, so Riadh, thank you for talking to me again. So eating disorders is something you've written about a lot in your career. What is it about eating disorders that makes them particularly interesting, you think, from an evolutionary perspective?
So there are a number of reasons and features of eating disorders, primarily anorexia and bulimia nervosa is what I'm referring to, that make these conditions of particular interest to evolutionists. These include the claim that anorexia and bulimia were either exceedingly rare or non-existent in pre-modern societies. The second reason is that they have increased in recent decades in Western countries. And the third is that this increase has now spread to developing countries in association with Westernization, industrialization, and urbanization. Similar observations apply to obesity, which is rare among hunter-gatherers and has become increasingly prevalent in modern societies. Now, these features are highly suggestive of evolutionary mismatch. Which suggests that certain factors in the modern environment have a crucial role in the etiology of these disorders. The other feature of interest in eating disorders, which make them of particular fascination to evolutionists, with regards to anorexia and bulimia, much less so for obesity, is their lopsided sex ratio, where these conditions affect far more females than males. And in fact, it is one of the most lopsided sex ratios in the whole of psychiatry. So this skewed sex ratio points to the possible relevance of sexual selection in their etiology. So these two factors combined, I would say, would make eating disorders maybe the ideal case study for the application of the principles of evolutionary medicine to eating disorders.
Right, and you're very well known in the community for your sexual competition hypothesis, which you explain alongside other competing hypotheses of eating disorders in the chapter. Could you explain this hypothesis a little bit more detail?
Yeah, I mean, I will give you some a broad outline. I would say, and I hope that people will read the chapter and gain more detailed knowledge. As you say, the chapter does provide a brief survey of a range of extant evolutionary theories for eating disorders. Then it focuses on the sexual competition hypothesis, as this model can explain or attempts to explain a wider range of eating disorders, which includes anorexia, bulimia, and subclinical forms, as well as give an explanation for the male typical presentations. It's more or less unique in that sense. So in a nutshell, the sexual competition hypothesis proposes that eating disorders is a manifestation of abnormally intense female intrasexual competition that arises from the novel conditions of the modern urban environment, where large numbers of young, autonomous females live in close proximity to each other. Now, this is a highly novel and abnormal, if you like, state compared to the ancestral environment. So female competition occurs in the modern environment through the display of signs of youth via a strategy of the pursuit of thinness. So I explain at some length in the chapter how this strategy makes sense within the context of the human mating system that is based on pair bonding and high male paternal investment. And pair bonding really refers to long-term mating strategies, which is more or less unique to humans compared to other great apes. Now, the extreme version of this phenomenon of the pursuit of thinness is what we call eating disorders. Within this model, eating disorders arise from mismatch and sexual selection, and therefore the phenomena of eating disorders are byproducts of a strategy that was once useful in the ancestral environment, but has become potentially dysfunctional in the modern environment when taken to extremes.
Right. What I think is really interesting about this hypothesis is it kind of it lends quite nicely to this common conception of unrealistic body images in the media as being somewhat responsible. But what you're doing is you're giving this kind of explanation as to why people would care about, you know, matching expectations to such an extent that they might end up leading to eating disorder. I think it's a really interesting hypothesis and definitely worth checking out. So the other side of this, obesity is not currently linked to any diagnosed mental disorder, except for binge eating, which is quite a specific case and doesn't really explain most cases of obesity. But obviously, as you said, it's a very novel thing. Could you just comment quickly on evolutionary models of overeating and obesity? It's an interesting part of the chapter, I think.
Yeah, well, this is I think probably unique for a volume that is sort of concerned with mental health. It's not usually the case that obesity is given much space. But we thought that given that we're dealing with eating disorders and discussing the question of mismatch, that because mismatch is directly relevant to evolutionary models of obesity, we thought we would discuss that as well. Of course, obesity, as you mentioned, it is not part of any mental health classification system. The main evolutionary models of obesity actually have mismatch at their heart. They include theories such as the thrifty gene hypothesis, and the so-called drifty gene hypothesis. So these two hypotheses are related to each other. The first one, the thrifty gene, suggests that we are the descendants of those who were good at conserving energy and storing energy because of the fact of the unreliability of nutrition in the environment, and therefore those who were able to conserve energy had a better chance at survival. The drifty gene hypothesis is an elaboration of this, where it suggests that there isn't only a bottom level, if you like, of weight below which that the body must not go because then it starts to damage health, but also that there is a top barrier, but this top barrier had, because of the fact that humans became, when the group size became larger and they managed to domesticate fire, predation became less of a risk, and the top level of weight, according to this hypothesis, was removed, and therefore obesity became theoretically possible, although it remained rare. A further version of the thrifty gene hypothesis was formulated by Daniel Nettle, and he called it the insurance hypothesis. And it's a variation on the thrifty gene, where he suggests that fat, the amount of fat relates to the assessment of the body or of a given human being, of the reliability of future nutritional availability. And the flip side of this is that he elaborates that this could explain also anorexia nervosa if the nutrition was so available, so abundantly available, and where it is assessed that the chances of famine are nil, then this is taken to extreme and anorexia nervosa results. This is Daniel Nettle's hypothesis. The other aspect to mismatch and obesity is with the issue of ultra processed foods, which are notorious for being obesogenic. So basically, all the evolutionary theories on obesity relate to mismatch of one kind or another.
Right, and also your sexual competition hypothesis also sort of relates to mismatch of a different kind. You can see that mismatch is obviously going to be very effective in a world where food has changed so much and society has changed so much around this specifically. Indeed. So yeah, finally, it's the $1 million question.
Yeah.
What do you think evolutionary approaches? How do they help us here? What does this add to the discussion if you're a public health official, or if you're a clinician, or if you're just someone in the general population? How can evolution help us understand, prevent, treat? It's a difficult question, I know, but I have to.
It is, yes. I mean, as you know, I'm not one to venture too readily into claims of therapeutic efficacy of any given theory, but I think that there is. If one is conservative about this, and I'm cautious about making claims of this nature, but I think the sexual competition hypothesis does lend itself to a degree to therapeutic, to psychological interventions where issues about competitiveness, intense competition, mate value, and so forth can be incorporated either in individual psychological therapy or group therapy, where of individuals who suffer from eating disorders. Also, there is what is called media literacy therapy that utilizes similar, utilizes the kind of practice, the kind of practices that the media use to basically doctor images of females to make them more perfect, more youthful, more thin, and so forth. And this has been used with individual patients or groups, and to good effect. I think that this is entirely consistent with the sexual competition hypothesis, because if these images, these abnormally perfect images of young and attractive women are intensifying intersexual competition, then having knowledge about the kind of tricks that the media use can be helpful. I wouldn't want to venture to give any, to volunteer any advice to public health specialists or anything like that. I think the issue of what is used in advertising and so forth, I think these things are well known, even though they may not be based on any evolutionary knowledge. But I mean, I think that evolutionary knowledge would help. Also, whether or not a public education, to have a sensitive approach to some public education, especially for young women, about the kind of harm that intense competition can cause. I'm very reticent to be prescriptive about this, but I'm just making suggestions that possibly a sensitive approach to having this kind of knowledge more widely available to young women or even the general public may be useful, but I make no claims about that.
I'm sure that's the case. That'll be the case with many of the discussions. What we're doing is we're trying to understand something at this deeper level, and hopefully we can hone in on some possible factors that have been missed or that might be under researched, and then we can test to see, if the predictions of evolutionary approaches would kind of help us understand, and then maybe we can arrive at some treatments. But for now, it's a very interesting explanation. It's a way to think about mental disorders and eating disorders in this case in a very different light, and I'm sure that people will gain something from it, clinicians and patients. And family and everyone alike. So thank you so much for talking to me today. I do hope people read the chapter and all of your other work around this. It's all fascinating, and thank you so much for joining.
Thank you very much, Adam, and good luck with your future interviews.
Cheers. Thank you.